Yeah, so as Louise got my name correctly, it's Cathal Fitzgerald, and I am the chairman of Arigna Group, and we're a biochar producer in Ireland. And I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so explaining how we ended up having one of the largest production facilities in Europe and probably the world, and the challenges and opportunities that come with that, and that we have faced and we continue to face. So a lot of the presentation is devoted to the opportunities and specifically trials that we are involved in to determine the viability of those opportunities. And so for each opportunity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set out the objective of the trial and then the scale and driver of the demand, and then give you some detail on the trial itself. But as Louisa said, like, we're a 100-year-old company, so how did we end up with this very large biochar production facility? I'll just give you a little bit of background on the company. It's a fifth-generation family-owned business with a strong engineering background. We have a production facility in County Roscommon in Ireland, and we've got 4 distribution facilities in the UK. We have 75 employees, and our revenues are approximately $18 million. Our background is in coal, and we didn't set out to make biochar. We arrived at the conclusion that biochar was the most suitable material to help in the transition from fossil fuels. It's also unusual that we've focused on only one attribute of biochar, that is, it's a good solid fuel substitute. And it's only in the last 2 years that we've actually started to look at the other uses of biochar. And as I've said, we now operate 2 35,000 metric ton biochar machines. And how did we get there? Well, I think it's worth spending a little time on this just to see how, like, our transition from what we term black to green. The company was founded 100 years ago as a mining company extracting coal for power generation in Ireland. In the late 1980s, we recognised that smoky coal was going to be phased out, and we started to manufacture smokeless coal for the Irish and UK markets. And in 2010, we actually began to reverse engineer smokeless coal. We were looking for a sustainable product that had all the attributes of coal, that is, its calorific value, cost, and even look and feel. And that's how we landed on biochar. In 2012, we purchased a 7,000 metric ton biochar machine as a pilot plant. And then we spent a long time designing a production process that would produce biochar for our biofuel. And in 2017, having perfected the production process, the company launched its sustainable fuel called Harvest Flame, which is 100% sustainable, and it's actually made from olive pits. And in 2023, we decided to scale up production, and we bought 2 large reactors, each with a capacity, as I've mentioned, of 35,000 metric tons. One we use as a dryer, and the other one we use as a reactor. The reactors were delivered in April 2023 and commissioned in November of that year, and they're now fully operational. So what we've done, the additional capacity that we have, we've actually used to ramp up production of Harvest Flame, but also to allow us to address other large volume uses of biochar, such as soil amendment in housing developments and chemical fertilizer replacement in golf greens and turf sod. So I'd like to, before I get to the opportunities, to address some of the challenges that we face, because we're sort of in the unusual position that we can produce an awful lot of biochar. So what comes with that is that, well, we have 2 sets of challenges as we think of them. We've got addressable challenges and non-addressable challenges. So the first thing is lack of large-scale markets other than the fuel market, and this is the single biggest issue we face. And what we mean by a market, it's a source of demand for a sufficient quantity of biochar at a profitable price. There's lots of research papers and reports which identify the benefits of biochar for so many areas, such as agriculture, the built environment, and others. But when you come to it, there's actually very little research on the economics of those uses. And also what we see is that many of the case studies that we see seem to be highly dependent on revenues from the VCM. But our response to this is that what we do is we identify and analyse markets where there is a potential for large-scale use in terms of volume, but there also has to be a particular catalyst that will allow that demand to be realised. And then what we do is we seek to partner with someone in the sector to bring focus to our research, and we get to trial as quickly as possible. And by trial, what we mean are field trials, because we've actually found that a key part of any trial is the actual application of the biochar itself. The second addressable challenge that we face is that the incumbent product is usually cheaper than our biochar. And the reason for this is that in the case of the incumbent product, it usually doesn't reflect the true cost of that product. And coal is a very good example. The true cost of coal is not reflected in its price because the cost of the environmental damage is not factored in. And again, our response here is quite simple. We have to be able to provide a product at the same value as the current product, as we have done in the case of coal, or we have to be able to solve a problem that the current product cannot. Another challenge is R&D. One of the downsides of the many uses of biochar is what to focus on. We have a lab and 2 researchers, so there's very little that we don't know or can't find out about manufacturing biochar. However, when it comes to its applications, we need the expertise in the built environment, soil science, renewable gas, agriculture and horticulture. It can be overwhelming and distracting. And given our resources, we take the approach that if the application doesn't have the potential to be large scale and profitable in the near term, we must move on. And our final challenge is funding. There are lots of reasons why raising money is an issue, such as our continued presence in coal, our location in Ireland, we're not a startup, and our current focus is on biofuel. The bottom line is that we struggle to raise capital, hence we must generate capital from internal sources and our existing shareholders in the near term, while increasing the awareness of the company in the medium term. And what about non-addressable challenges? The first, as I've mentioned, we still manufacture a lot of smokeless coal, and this can shut down conversations very early. And sometimes we're advised to close down the coal facility or separate the coal and biochar businesses. Neither is possible for us due to cost and practicality. But over time, we are replacing our coal sales with biochar-based fuel, but it's going to take time. A second challenge is location. We have a 25-acre site in the middle of Ireland, and this is sometimes an issue. We are not close to feedstocks or markets. However, it's becoming less of an issue for us as we gain traction in high value-add markets, as you will see later in the presentation. Also, we have the advantage that we are in large-scale production and we don't have planning or permitting issues. The sustainability rollback is another challenge, but again, it's not as big an issue as we thought it would be. The reasons is that we see when we see organisations considering biochar, it's because they have a problem and biochar might solve it. The problem might be related to sustainability, but there's always a more immediate issue, and that's what we focus on. And secondly, below the headlines we see about sustainability rollback, many of the organisations are already subject to regulations that won't be changed easily, and also these organisations tend to take a longer term view than the political cycle. In short, we don't see sustainability as a main driver of demand, and we don't sell sustainability. We sell a product that has benefits, one of which is sustainability. And then I'll come to the perception challenge about biochar. As we know, biochar has been around for a long time, and there is a sense that while it's a breakthrough and magical material, it has never achieved its full potential. And there's definitely an element of fatigue in certain sectors that we speak to. And our response here is that we have to demonstrate that we have track record and can produce large quantities of consistent quality biochar. And we can also provide ongoing analysis of the characteristics of our biochar. And the final challenge under non-addressable is one that's been discussed yesterday, and Miles was talking about in terms of standards, etc. And it's this definition debate. And it's interesting and it's sometimes controversial. And I will come back to it later. But what we find is that it's more an issue for biochar industry participants and those focused on CDRs in particular. It's less important to our target markets. So now I'm going to come to our opportunities. And what I've done is I've split our opportunities into fuel and non-fuel. I realise that using biochar for fuel is contentious and many people take exception to it. But for us it's a necessity, and insofar as it replaces fossil fuel and wood, it's actually doing a lot of good. So our immediate opportunity is our biofuel harvest flame, and it's sold as a domestic fuel. The product, as I've mentioned, is made from olive pits, which are a byproduct of olive oil. And our process is optimised to produce the maximum amount of biochar while using the syngas to run the thermal oxidizer. We have perfected this process over many years with the objective of making harvest flame competitive with fossil fuels and wood. What we find is that consumers will buy a sustainable product, but they won't pay a significant green premium or take a significant utility discount. So the good news here is that we are gaining some traction with the product as a replacement for coal and increasingly wood in the domestic setting. Interestingly, there has been a sharp purchase in the purchase of wood stoves in the UK, leading to the importation of wood from old forests in Europe and the use of wet wood sourced locally, and this has serious health implications. The bad news for us is that the fuel market is ultimately a declining one. Also, as winters become warmer and shorter, it's also become more seasonal and a weather-related convenience purchase. So our recent deal with Aldi, who some of you may know as the German discounter, is a major boost for us. Aldi, having trialled the product as a special buy for 3 weeks last winter, have committed to stocking Harvest Flame in its 162 stores in Ireland for the next 2 years. A related opportunity is the use of biochar as an industrial fuel to replace fossil fuel in the manufacture of cement. And this has been happening because cement companies are now increasingly looking for, or the customers of cement companies, I should say, are increasingly looking for green cement, and they actually will pay a modest premium. There's a cost factor as well. For every tonne of fossil fuel used, the cement company must purchase 2.5 carbon credits on the official EU carbon market. So right now, our biochar is still more expensive than the fossil fuel plus carbon credits, but the gap is narrowing quickly. In the cement company's regulatory application to burn biochar, they mention potential of 300 to 500 metric tonnes per month. So the trial, a little bit of detail on the trial. The material has been tested in the lab setting, that is in their lab setting, and it has worked well. And a larger trial is due to commence at the end of a production run of cement, whereby approximately 80 metric tonnes will be used as fuel, and the output will be analysed in terms of cement characteristics and costs. And now what I'd like to do is just talk about our non-fuel trials. So we've identified a few sectors where we believe there are large-scale profitable markets. And interestingly, in the cases that I'm going to talk about, the opportunity is not just primarily sustainability driven or a belief in biochar per se, but rather there's a specific problem that cannot be addressed by the incumbent product, or sometimes it's even being caused by the incumbent product. So golf courses and putting greens in particular have been identified as an opportunity that meets our criteria. So the golf industry is facing a number of significant near-term issues. Peat, an important substrate, is increasingly difficult to source. Drier summers are leading to increased water usage. Many chemical fertilizers and biosolid-based fertilizers in particular are facing increasing restrictions. Thus, the drivers of the opportunity are the cost of maintaining greens and the regulatory restrictions on fertilizers. It's obviously a very large opportunity with lots of golf courses with very large budgets. And in this case, we've partnered with Ohio State University on the trial. So in the case of the trial, a little bit of detail. What we're doing here is we're testing biochar at 10% and 20% concentrations against an industry standard fertilizer and a control, and there's 4 replications of each. The tests we're using are germination, colour, NDVI, and speed of aeration hole closure. It's early days, but the initial results are promising, and we've already learned a lot just from running the trial and applying the biochar itself. A related trial is in the turf sod sector. The issue here is that turf sod farming strips the top layer from the land, which degrades the soil. Thus, topsoil from other locations must be periodically added to the soil at significant cost. Also, chemical and biosolid fertilizers are heavily used in the industry, and as I've mentioned, there's increasing regulatory issues here. It's another very large opportunity with very specific issues, and again, we've partnered with OSU on the trial. So a little bit of detail here, and what we're doing is we're testing our biochar against an industry standard fertilizer, and the specifications and the tests here are essentially the same as the putting green trial. Again, early days, but the initial indications here are promising in terms of grass growth. The next trial I'd like to focus on is in the agricultural crop sector, and it's a trial that we have ongoing in Ireland. So the issue here is that soil health is being impacted, as you will all know, by intensive farming and the increasing amount of chemical fertilizers that are required to maintain yields. These fertilizers are impacting soil health and also leaching into watercourses, causing severe ecological damage. It's an unsustainable situation, and many growers are under pressure to come up with solutions. The scale of the opportunity is significant as fertiliser use in Ireland and across the world continues to rise. So in this particular case, we've partnered with Mead Farm Group, which is the largest vegetable grower and supplier in Ireland. And they also supply vegetables to the main grocery multiples in Ireland and the UK. It's a family-owned business with a long-term perspective. And some of the details on the trial here. It's an interesting trial in that it's not as much science-based as the OSU trials, but as part of the trial, what we're doing is we're testing the biochar application under current farming practices, which is essentially to spread liquid manure post-germination. So in the trial, what we've done is we've taken a 10-acre field and mixed biochar with manure. We've applied this pre-seeding and post-germination, and this will be compared to the traditional practice of spreading manure post-germination. We've taken soil samples prior to the trial, and we'll periodically do soil and microbial tests over the course of the next year. And the last one I'd like to talk about is interesting as well, in the sense that it's a completely different sector. So what this is a trial in a residential development in Ireland. The problem in these residential and commercial developments is that there's extensive vegetation failure, which then requires repeated and costly remediation. And the underlying issue seems to be that the quality of the soils that are used on these areas, these are called structured soils, as they are made to certain specifications from the existing soil on site and then applied to the site. Interestingly, sustainability has been mentioned, but it's a secondary issue. It's a fascinating and complex project. The initial objective was to reduce vegetation failure, but it then became apparent that there was significant cost savings to be made. Manufacturing the structured soils, which includes biochar, on site is substantially cheaper than the industry standard method of moving strip soil off site for processing. It's a very significant but unquantified opportunity. And in this case, we've partnered with one of the largest house builders in Ireland, a structured soil specialist, and a landscape architect. So the trial is on one section of the largest housing development currently underway in Ireland. It's effectively a new town. There's 13 specified structured soils, and 3 of them are designated to include biochar. So what we've done is we've actually delivered 25 tonnes of biochar, which is being mixed into the 3 soils to test if it can be mixed successfully. So the initial results have been good, and the structured soil specialist has recommended that the trial be expanded to this one section of the site. And this one section alone would equate to 200 metric tonnes of biochar. So the first test has been passed in that not only is it cost neutral, but we now know that there's a significant cost saving. Another test, which was the original test, is that the cost of remediation at this section of the site compared to previous sections and industry norms, and we will only find that out in time. I'm going to briefly just highlight some of the other trials that we have ongoing. We've got trials in natural gas, the replacement of chemical fertilizers on football pitches. We've even gone and created a UPVC prototype incorporating biochar. So some of these trials are completed and they won't progress, and it's usually down to economics. Others are still in progress, are yet to start, and I've listed them here, and if you want to know anything more about any of them in particular, just contact me after the presentation. So I also thought it would be useful just to take a quick look at how things have changed over the course of the year. I had the pleasure of speaking at the conference last year, and I discussed the opportunities that we faced then. And I thought it might be useful just to show you how our thinking has evolved in terms of opportunities now compared to then. So fuel remains our single biggest opportunity, but the order of most other opportunities has reversed. Of course, it could all change again, but it does demonstrate the importance of being flexible and responsive. And then, so to wrap up, what I thought I would do is I'd list the questions that we get asked by prospective customers and what we rarely get asked. And then I'd cover a few observations and conclusions. So the key question we get asked is scale. How much can you produce right now? And it's just a deal breaker. You can't have meaningful conversations with the customers that we want to talk to if you don't have scale. Relatedly is consistency of supply and consistency of quality. You have to be able to assure on both. It's expected that you can provide real-time analysis of the product. Price, value, functionality are key issues that you would expect, but it's usually relative to an incumbent product. And finally, and not to be underestimated, is the importance of trying to understand the problem that the customer is trying to solve. It's usually a real-world problem with a cost implication. And I think it's demonstrated by our involvement in large-scale trials, and we in Arigna are well placed to help answer some of these questions. And what about infrequently asked questions? Now, it might come as a surprise, but we don't get asked a lot of questions on issues that are much debated within the biochar industry, such as the definition of biochar, the characteristics of biochar, proximity of feedstock. It's not an issue for us. We can provide analysis on our biochar from start to finish, and we've published research papers, one of which is highlighted on the screen. But we think there are two reasons why we don't get asked these questions. The first is that the potential users of biochar, they just see it as a product that might replace an existing product, whereas we in the industry, I feel, tend to see it as a very special material. The second reason is measurement. Potential users measure biochar against what they currently use, whereas we tend to measure biochar against scientific gold standards, or standards that will take a millennia to correct. So in terms of observations, our clear focus is on value and utility from a customer's perspective. We believe the key drivers of demand are regulatory pressure and concerns about the impact of incumbent products. Our emphasis is on trialling only what can be produced and sold profitably at scale, and trials are key, but they must be as close to the real world as possible and with high quality partners. So in conclusion, we at Arigna can produce large quantities of consistently high quality biochar. We are last seeing increasing levels of interest backed up with some significant demand. And this is bringing some clarity on the areas of market of demand that are of interest to us, and it's also helping us with product development. However, as I've shown, it's an evolving market and it can change quickly. So thank you for your time. And with that, if I have time, I will take some questions. Yeah, thank you.